All right, get ready, because we are diving deep into English improvement, practical tips and strategies, the guide that you sent us. And let me tell you, it is absolutely jam-packed with ways to level up your English skills. And we're not talking about boring old textbook stuff. This is all about weaving English into your everyday life. It's almost like a secret mission.
Yeah, I noticed that the guide really emphasizes this little and often approach, which I thought was interesting.
Exactly. It's about ditching those marathon study sessions, and instead just sprinkling little bits of English throughout your day. Kind of like how you sneak veggies into a smoothie,
Yeah.
You get all of the goodness without even realizing it. But I'm curious, why is this little and often tactic so effective?
Well, it all comes down to how our brains learn. Think about it like building a muscle. One massive workout won't get you ripped right. It's the consistent daily reps that make the difference. And it's the same with language. When you expose your brain to English regularly, you're strengthening those neural pathways, making it easier to understand and speak naturally.
So it's like building those mental English muscles day by day. I like that. Now, the guide doesn't just talk theory, it's loaded with practical tips. Anything that jumped out at you?
One that really caught my eye was the suggestion to switch your phone's language settings to English. It seems so simple, but, think about how much time we spend on our phones. Scrolling, texting, even just navigating apps. You're constantly surrounded by the language, passively absorbing it.
That's sneaky good. I mean, wouldn't that get confusing, though? If you're trying to find a specific setting or app?
Yeah, the guide addresses that. It suggests starting gradually, maybe switch just one app at a time or change your keyboard settings first. The idea is to ease yourself into it, not create a frustrating experience.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about finding those little swaps that fit seamlessly into your routine. So we're getting immersed in English. But what about actually speaking it? I know that can be a big hurdle for many people.
Absolutely. The guide tackles this head on, It acknowledges that fear of making mistakes can be paralyzing, but it emphasizes that making mistakes is not just inevitable, it's essential to learning.
Yeah, I can see that. But knowing you'll make mistakes doesn't always make it easier to open your mouth, does it? What if you freeze up or feel embarrassed?
Right. It's about pushing past that initial discomfort. And the guide offers some really practical strategies for that. For instance, it suggests joining online English-speaking communities. These are spaces where people are specifically there to practice, so the environment is generally more forgiving and supportive.
That's a good point. You're surrounded by others who are on the same journey, making those inevitable stumbles along the way. But what about practicing with native speakers? That can feel pretty intimidating.
It doesn't have to be. The guide suggests finding a language partner, even if they're not a native speaker themselves. The key is to create a comfortable space where you can both practice and learn from each other's mistakes. And for those who are still feeling a bit shy, they have this really intriguing technique called shadowing.
Shadowing? I've heard of that. But how does it actually work?
So imagine you're a local detective, following the footsteps of a native speaker. You listen to a recording, could be a podcast, a movie clip, anything, and you try to mimic their pronunciation, their rhythm, their intonation. It's like having a vocal coach right in your ear, guiding you to sound more natural and fluent.
So it's about training your ear and your tongue to work together, like a synchronized swimming routine. But wouldn't you just end up sounding like a parrot?
Not exactly. It's about absorbing those subtle nuances of pronunciation and intonation. You're not trying to become a perfect copy, but rather to internalize the natural flow of the language.
I see. It's like learning the dance steps so you can eventually freestyle with confidence. Okay, so we're immersed in English, we're pushing ourselves to speak. But what about building up that vocabulary? We all know how frustrating it can be to hit a wall when you just don't have the words to express yourself.
Absolutely. And the guide goes beyond the typical memorize these word lists approach. It emphasizes the importance of using new words in real contexts, not just reciting definitions.
So it's not enough to know that exquisite means extremely beautiful. You actually have to use it in a sentence. Like describing a truly breathtaking sunset or delicious meal. I get it. But how do you bridge that gap between knowing a word and actually using it?
That's where the guide gets creative. One suggestion is the 5-word challenge. It's almost like a game. You choose 5 new words each day, maybe from something you've read or heard, and challenge yourself to use each word in a sentence throughout the day.
That's a cool idea. It makes learning vocabulary more active and engaging. And speaking of engaging, this guide doesn't shy away from the power of phrases and synonyms.
Exactly. It talks about moving beyond single-word definitions and exploring the richness of expressions. For example, instead of just saying happy, you could use phrases like over the moon or on cloud nine to add more color and personality to your English.
So it's about painting a more vivid picture with your words, not just sketching a basic outline. I like that. Now let's tackle a skill that often causes learners to hit a wall: listening comprehension. I mean, you could have all the vocabulary in the world.
Yeah.
But if you can't understand native speakers when they talk, it can feel incredibly frustrating.
Absolutely. That's a common struggle, and the guide acknowledges it. It emphasizes that improving listening comprehension is a journey, not a destination. You're not going to magically understand everything overnight, but you can train your ear to become more attuned to the nuances of spoken English.
Okay, so it's a gradual process. But where do you even begin? Do you just jump in the deep end and hope for the best?
Not quite. The guide recommends starting with materials that are specifically designed for learners, like podcasts or audiobooks with slower narration and clearer pronunciation. Think of it like starting with the bunny slopes before tackling the black diamond. You build your confidence and skills gradually.
That makes sense. But how do you actually train your ear to pick up on those tricky sounds and rapid-fire speech patterns?
Well, there's some really effective techniques. One that stood out to me is called listen and repeat. You choose a short audio clip, could be a sentence, a phrase, anything, and you play it pause, and then try to repeat it verbatim, matching the speaker's pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation as closely as possible. It's like a vocal workout for your ears and your tongue.
So it's about slowing down, dissecting those sounds, and then piecing them back together. I can see how that would be helpful. But honestly, sometimes it feels like my brain just can't process all those sounds at once. Any tips for dealing with that overwhelm?
Absolutely. The guide recommends a technique that might surprise you: dictation.
Dictation, like back in school when we had to write down everything the teacher said.
Exactly. But instead of a teacher, it's a podcast host, a news anchor, or even a character in a movie. You choose an audio clip, listen carefully, and try to write down every single word you hear.
I have to admit, that sounds a bit tedious. How does that actually help with listening comprehension?
It forces you to pay attention to every sound and nuance, to break down the speech into smaller chunks, and to really engage with the language on a deeper level. It's like doing a puzzle with your ears.
I never thought about it that way. It's like training your brain to become a detective, piecing together those auditory clues. Now, there's one big elephant in the room that we haven't addressed yet: grammar. I know for many learners, it feels like this huge, scary monster standing between them and fluency.
Yeah. The guide takes a refreshing approach to grammar. It dispels the myth that you need to achieve perfect grammar before you can start speaking confidently. Instead, it advocates for a more natural, intuitive approach.
So it's not about memorizing every single grammar rule or obsessing over every little mistake.
Not at all. The guide emphasizes that fluency comes from using the language, from experimenting, from making those inevitable mistakes and learning from them. It's about understanding the overall flow and structure of English, not getting bogged down in technicalities.
That's a relief, but if you're not focusing on rules and textbooks, how do you actually learn grammar in a natural way?
The guide suggests a strategy that might surprise you reading fiction.
Reading novels, how does that help with grammar?
Well, think about it. When you immerse yourself in well-written prose, you're constantly exposed to correct grammar in action. You're absorbing sentence structures, verb tenses, punctuation, all those elements of grammar without even realizing it.
So it's like osmosis for your grammar skills. You're soaking up the good stuff simply by enjoying a good book. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
But what about those times when you need a little extra help with grammar? Like when you're writing an email or trying to construct a complex sentence?
Yeah, the guide acknowledges that there's a time and place for more focused grammar practice. It suggests utilizing grammar checking tools like Grammarly or language learning apps.
Those can be super helpful, but I know some people rely on them too heavily, almost like a crutch.
That's a valid concern. The guide emphasizes that these tools should be used as learning aids, not substitutes for understanding the underlying concepts. Think of them like training wheels on a bike. They provide support, but the goal is to eventually ride on your own.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about finding that balance between utilizing helpful tools and building your own grammatical intuition. Now, we've covered a ton of ground here, from immersion techniques to speaking practice, vocabulary building, listening strategies, and even tackling grammar. It's clear that this guide is packed with actionable advice.
But the real magic happens when you take these tips and weave them into your own unique learning journey.
Exactly. It's not about blindly following every suggestion, but about finding the strategies that resonate with your learning style, your goals, and your lifestyle.
And that's what we're going to delve into next. We'll explore how to personalize these tips and create an English learning plan that's tailor-made for you.
Sounds good. Okay, so we've unpacked like a ton of practical tips from English improvement, practical tips and strategies. But now comes the exciting part, figuring out how to make these tips work for you. It's like having all the ingredients for a delicious meal. But now we need to create the recipe right now.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. You know, this guide isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It's more like a toolbox filled with different strategies. And the key is to choose the tools that best fit your individual learning style, your goals, and your lifestyle.
Okay, so let's say someone is like super busy, juggling work, family, and maybe even a few other commitments. How do they realistically fit English learning into their already packed schedule?
Well, that's where those micro habits we talked about earlier come in. Remember, it's not about finding huge chunks of time, but rather about weaving little bits of English into your existing routine. Think about your daily commute. Could you listen to an English podcast or audiobook? Or how about during your lunch break? Could you read a few pages of an English novel or watch a short English video?
Right. It's about finding those little pockets of time that are often wasted, scrolling through social media or just zoning out. And speaking of social media, could that actually be a tool for learning English?
Absolutely. The guide suggests following English-speaking accounts on platforms like Instagram, Twitter, or even TikTok. You can immerse yourself in the language passively by reading posts, watching videos, and even interacting with others in the comments section.
That's a great way to make learning English feel less like a chore and more like a natural part of your day. But what about those moments when you really need to focus and practice specific skills? How do you create those dedicated learning sessions without feeling overwhelmed?
One approach the guide recommends is time boxing. It's a productivity technique where you allocate specific blocks of time for certain tasks. So you might decide to dedicate 30 minutes every morning to vocabulary practice, or an hour every evening to listening comprehension.
So it's about being intentional with your time, carving out those dedicated slots for English, and treating them like important appointments. But let's face it, even with the best intentions, sometimes life gets in the way. How do you stay motivated and avoid falling off the wagon?
Well, that's where setting realistic goals and celebrating those small wins comes in. Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Don't try to do everything at once. Start with 1 or 2 specific goals, something achievable that you can build on. Maybe it's learning 5 new words a day or listening to 1 English podcast a week.
So it's about setting yourself up for success, not setting yourself up for disappointment. I like that. And what about tracking progress? Is that important?
Definitely. The guide emphasizes that tracking your progress can be a powerful motivator. It helps you see how far you've come and reinforces that sense of accomplishment. It could be as simple as keeping a journal where you record your daily learning activities, or using a language learning app that tracks your vocabulary and grammar progress.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like having a visual reminder of your dedication and hard work. Now let's talk about another important aspect of language learning, finding resources and materials that keep you engaged and excited. I mean, nobody wants to be stuck with dry textbooks and boring exercises, right?
Absolutely. The guide encourages you to explore a variety of resources and find what sparks your interest. If you love movies, watch English films and TV shows. If you're a bookworm, dive into English novels. If you're passionate about a certain hobby, find English language websites, blogs, or podcasts dedicated to that topic. The key is to make learning English feel like a fun and enriching experience, not a chore.
I love that. It's about turning your passions into learning opportunities. But what if someone is struggling to find resources that are at their level, that are challenging enough, but not so difficult that they feel discouraged?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. The guide suggests starting by honestly assessing your current level, and then gradually increasing the difficulty as you progress. There are tons of resources available for English learners of all levels, from beginner to advanced. You can find graded readers, simplified news articles, podcasts designed for learners, and even language exchange apps that connect you with native speakers who are also learning your language.
So there's really no excuse for being bored or feeling stuck. There's a whole world of English learning resources out there waiting to be explored. But let's face it, sometimes even the most motivated learners hit a plateau. They feel like they're not making progress. And that can be incredibly discouraging. Any tips for dealing with those moments of doubt?
Yeah, the guide addresses this head-on. It emphasizes that plateaus are a natural part of the learning process. Everyone experiences them. And it doesn't mean you're not capable of reaching fluency. It might just be a sign that you need to switch things up a bit. Maybe you need to try a new learning method, explore a different resource, or simply take a short break to recharge your batteries.
So it's about recognizing those plateaus as opportunities for growth,
Right.
not as signs of failure. I like that. Now we've talked about the practicalities of learning English, finding time, setting goals, choosing resources. But there's another crucial element that we haven't touched on yet: mindset. How does your mindset impact your language learning journey?
That's a fantastic question. The guide dedicates an entire section to the importance of cultivating a positive and growth-oriented mindset. It emphasizes that believing in yourself, embracing challenges, and viewing mistakes as learning opportunities are essential for achieving fluency.
So it's not just about what you do, but about how you think about the process.
Exactly. If you approach language learning with a sense of fear, self-doubt, or frustration, you're more likely to give up when things get tough. But if you cultivate a mindset of curiosity, resilience, and perseverance, you'll be much more likely to overcome those obstacles and reach your goals.
I love that. It's about viewing language learning as an exciting adventure, not a daunting task. But how do you actually cultivate that positive mindset? I mean, it's easy to say believe in yourself, but how do you actually do it when you're feeling discouraged or overwhelmed?
Well, the guide offers some really practical strategies. One is to surround yourself with positive influences. Connect with other English learners, join online communities, find a language partner who inspires you. Another strategy is to celebrate your successes no matter how small. Did you learn a new word today? Great. Did you understand a bit more of that podcast episode than you did last week? Fantastic. Acknowledge those wins and let them fuel your motivation.
So it's about creating a positive feedback loop, focusing on the good stuff, and letting that propel you forward. I like that. And we've talked about personalizing your learning approach, setting goals, finding resources, and cultivating a positive mindset. But what about the bigger picture? Why are you learning English in the first place? How does that purpose drive your journey?
That's a powerful question. The guide encourages you to connect with your deeper motivation for learning English. What are your goals? What doors do you hope to unlock? What connections do you aspire to make? Tap into that underlying purpose, and it will fuel your commitment and passion for mastering this language.
It's like having a North Star guiding you on your journey. It gives you direction and helps you stay focused when the going gets tough. Now, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, exploring the practicalities of improving your English skills. But before we wrap things up, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that language learning is a personal journey, and what works for one person might not work for another.
Absolutely. The beauty of this guide is that it offers a diverse toolkit, allowing you to choose the strategies that resonate with your unique learning style and preferences.
So as you embark on your English learning adventure, remember that it's okay to experiment, to try different approaches, and to find what works best for you.
And most importantly, don't forget to enjoy the process. Language learning is an incredible opportunity to expand your horizons, connect with new people and cultures, and unlock a world of possibilities.
And on that note, we'll move on to some final thoughts and takeaways to help you solidify all of this amazing information. Wow, what a journey we've been on, exploring all those fantastic tips from English improvement, practical tips and strategies. It's like we've unlocked this treasure chest full of language learning secrets.
It really is amazing how much practical advice is packed into this guide. And what really stood out to me is how it emphasizes the importance of finding joy in the learning process. It's not just about, drills and textbooks. It's about embracing the beauty and the richness of the English language.
I totally agree. It's about those aha moments when you suddenly understand a complex sentence, or when you can finally express yourself fluently in conversation. Those moments are so rewarding.
Yeah.
And they make all the hard work worthwhile.
Yeah, and it's also about the connections you make along the way, whether it's with fellow learners, native speakers, or even with characters in books and movies. Learning English opens up this whole new world of relationships and shared experiences.
Absolutely. And, as we wrap up this deep dive, I can't help but think about all the amazing things that are possible when you have a strong command of English. It's a global language that opens doors to countless opportunities, both personally and professionally.
It allows you to access information from around the world, to participate in international collaborations, to travel with confidence, and to pursue your dreams on a global stage.
It's about breaking down those communication barriers and fostering a deeper understanding between people from different cultures and backgrounds.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important reminder for all of us. No matter what stage we're at in our language learning journey, it's not just about acquiring a skill, it's about expanding our horizons, broadening our perspectives. and making our world a little bit smaller and more connected.
Beautifully said. So as you continue on your English learning adventure, remember that you're not just learning a language. You're embarking on this journey of self-discovery, cultural exploration, and personal growth. Embrace the challenges, celebrate the victories, and never stop exploring the magic of the English language.
And remember, we're here to support you every step of the way. If you ever feel stuck or discouraged, don't hesitate to reach out. We're a community of language lovers, and we're all in this together.
Until next time, happy learning.